you, Stephen. Number of guests duly introduced by fellows beg leave to attend your meeting. Is it your pleasure that I welcome them in your name? Thank you. Minutes.
It's disconcerting seeing myself on the screen. Society of Antiquaries of London, ordinary meeting Thursday, 7th of April 2022, online only. Dr. John Cooper, Director, in the chair. The minutes of the previous ordinary meeting of Thursday, 31st of March 2022 were read and signed. This being a meeting for the election of fellows, the following were declared elected: Michelle Alexander, Stephen Bernard, Greg Shooter, Anna Collar, Amanda Dotseth, Judith Doyle, Timothy Easton, Will Fletcher, Anne Ford, Tony Hack, Philip Hume and Rupert Jackson. The following communication was then laid before the Society. William Boyer's Heroica Eulogia of 1567, an illuminated history of the Earls of Leicester from the Tower Records, by Professor Norman Jones, FSA. Thanks were returned for this communication. The Director announced that the next meeting would be anniversary meeting on Thursday, 28th of April, 2022, and then adjourned the meeting.
Is it your pleasure that I sign these minutes as a true and complete record? Thank you. We now turn to the business of the anniversary meeting. First, it is my pleasure and duty to thank ordinary members of council and one officer whose terms have come to an end. Vince Gaffney and Sam Lucy have served as members of council, Sam as most recently as vice president for the last 3 years. We're very grateful to them for their work and efforts on behalf of the society. And further back, Chris Scull stood down just after the last anniversary meeting for personal reasons as having served as director, and we record our sincere thanks to Chris for all he did over a number of years as an officer of the Society. Turning now to elections, we have ballots for director and 2 ordinary members of council. These are uncontested, and therefore no ballot will take place as provided for in order number 1, paragraph 4.2. The meeting may therefore note the election of the following for the period 2022 to 2025. As director, Dr. John Cooper. As ordinary members of council, Dr. Anne McSween and Professor Simon Kainer. Welcome to you. Can I just say at this moment in the meeting, John Cooper had very much hoped to be here today. The points on the East Coast main line failed and his train was so far delayed that it was only thing to do was to go back to his home just outside York, and I hope and believe he is online with us. So we're so very sorry not to have John here. And I should also pass on the apologies from our Secretary, Heather Sabir, who, having avoided COVID for however long it is since the outbreak started, tested positive to it yesterday and is very sorry not to be here today. But we welcome in absentia John and Anne to council, and Simon Kainer, who is with us this afternoon. The other person who is leaving after the anniversary meeting is our General Secretary, John Lewis. And it's, I hope, the wish of the meeting that we wish him our warmest good wishes for his retirement. Some of us attended a party organised by his staff last Friday, which his period as General Secretary was celebrated, but it's worth, I think, formally noting today his contribution to the Society. The General Secretary's job is one that is extremely difficult, challenging, even in normal circumstances, balancing the books, the interests of the fellowship, and the charitable aims of a society like ours with a small staff under a lot of pressure is a difficult job. Different General Secretaries bring different qualities to the role. I've now known in various capacities 5 General Secretaries, and I was pleased in 2010 to be on the appointment committee that appointed John.
You fool.
We didn't make a mistake. We were impressed at the time by his skills and experience, particularly in project management and team building, working with people. Those qualities have shone through in John's period as General Secretary. He's served this society very well through extremely difficult times, not least the COVID pandemic. And all the presidents who have worked with him will attest what dedicated and enjoyable person he is to work with. His sense of humour is well known. He's deeply committed to the role of the Society as a charity whose aims are to promote public benefit, and he's deeply committed to widening public access. That's been seen through in a number of ways. Looking back over his period of General Secretary, he's overseen the modernisation, the management of the Society, the revision of its statutes, the establishment of an ethical conduct panel and a system for dealing with complaints, the design of an affiliate membership scheme, which comes to a vote today. And most notably, he's turned Kelmscott round. When I was first an officer of this society 15 years or so ago, the problem was Kelmscott. It wasn't seen as anything beyond a problem a lot of the time, and that had been the case for a number of years. John did that thing that leaders do, which is to turn a problem into an opportunity. With others, he defined the Kelmscott and Morris past, present and future lottery project, which gained funding and has transformed Kelmscott so that it is now a jewel in our crown. That was displayed brilliantly in the event at Kelmscott on the 24th of March, when the sun shone and Kelmscott was radiant and everyone was happy. I know that John is disappointed to be leaving at this stage when the problems over our lease here at Burlington House still remain unresolved. But he's made gargantuan efforts to move this forward. He's taken a key role in one aspect of this in particular, which is bringing the societies round the courtyard together to a common approach and to address government with a common voice. That is, those of us who've worked within the courtyard know is no inconsiderable achievement. And only if those who've seen what's been going on behind the scenes can fully appreciate John's efforts for the society over Burlington House. We will be long in his debt for work on this thankless and frustrating task. I hope and believe your efforts will be rewarded. I would now like to just ask the 3 former presidents who are in the audience here today, whether they'd like to say a few words about John and his time as General Secretary. Can I call upon Maurice Howard just to say a few moments to start?
Accustomed as I am to public speaking, even I have a little crib tonight because this is a very moving and special occasion. The microphone. This is a very moving and special occasion, and therefore I want to make sure I say all the things I've thought about within the few minutes of time I've allotted myself. As you know, when people do these things, as people are leaving, often people say, oh, I remember the interview, and they dig out all the papers that were thereby relevant to embarrass the successful applicant. Well, I'm moving house at the moment, and all my papers are in store, so I can't do that, John. But they're still there, and one day in my memoirs they will have a place, I'm sure. Many people have quoted the story about how John met two people sitting on the steps outside who, of course, couldn't come into the society at that time. But I also know that when he was brought round the premises that day, brought into the building by one of our fellows, sadly now no longer with us, that person said to him, oh yes, we don't let anybody in here. And John was rather struck by this, and it has been a testament to the 12 years since that point in time that John has made great strides in opening the place to a wider public. John succeeded at a time when we'd been moving at a breathless pace of ideas and innovation, some of which worked and some of which were never going to work, but that was one particular exciting time. I felt John pulled all that together and was a very firm handle on taking us to something towards something which was very, very workable and ultimately enormously successful. I felt in those early years, John and I together were, as it were, almost literally digging the trenches at Kelmscott in terms of the problems there were there, and as you've just heard from the President, John has turned all that into gold by seeing through the most recent project. In meetings, I felt I really stepped up in those 4 years, knowing that John wanted me to keep to time, and I'm not sure, coming from academia, that I'd ever run meetings to time. But we really got through things very, very purposefully, and it was his example that helped me do that. And there was a sense in which John was dealing with all the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty, and the kind of imaginative overview of running the society, and left me to do the charm and the kind of academic, kind of, speculative overview on occasions like this and after lectures. Two things particularly I just want to remember, though. We were together for the opening of the Society's exhibition at the Yale Centre for British Art, and that was a great occasion. And after we'd had supper together one evening, and there was a bit of a standoff over Angela Merkel's wanting to interfere in the problems of the Greek government, I listened to John very, very hard on that and decided I would say nothing because I thought we will have rather different views on exactly what's going on here. But then the great joy I had in the few days after the exhibition opened of going round the exhibition with John, and we took docents, we took alumni of my university who live in northeastern states of America, we took patrons around, and I talked about the art and other things. John talked about the early stuff, and standing with him with the Bronze Age shield and listening to him talk about it was a very, very moving moment, and I had that not just once but 5 or 6 times during that week. And also, and this is a very personal note really, difficult times as we've all had with the last years of the lives of our parents. And when I would drive away from some very difficult times during their last illnesses, at night I would turn from the M4 onto the M25 on my journey back to Brighton. I would see Terminal 5 and I would cheer up because I'd think, that's John's world. We wouldn't know what we know about what's under there if John hadn't seen that project through. And that was also something which lifted me from duty towards the more imaginative world in which I live at that time. Here at the Antiquaries, we are scholars, we are administrators, we manage our social communication skills. John Lewis has all these things, and I wish him a very, very happy retirement. working as I know he plans to do, doing everyday things at Kelmscott, not running the place, but helping them to keep the place alive. And I wish him well on the travels that he and Catherine have planned in the near future. So my very best wishes, John, my deepest thanks, and I look forward to seeing lots more of you.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you very much.
Jill, please.
Could the loop be made to work? It's just hissing at present.
Can we do something about the induction loop?
Go and ask Yola. Hasn't been the same without you, Andrew.
So inevitably, I think all us presidents have slightly different perspectives on John. I think I'm the only president for whom it hasn't been their first experience of working with John. For me, it will be my last, as we do go back rather a long way. And reflecting on John's time at Burlington House has made me realise just how important his earlier career has been to the successful way in which he's tackled the role of General Secretary. So I thought I'd indulge in a brief retrospective. My first memory of John, actually he's clear it's not the first time we met, but it's the first memory of him that I have, is locating him in a corner of the Museum of London Archaeology Service, surrounded by a pile of flints which he was refitting, with a propped-up copy of the Daily Telegraph in front of him. And I distinctly remember being impressed at this political statement in what was rather a left-wing milieu, as I recall. But as I rapidly came to understand, John is a man of very strongly held opinions he's ready to assert whenever he regards it as needful. But back to the flints. They were from a site called Three Ways Wharf on the Cone floodplain of the Thames to the west of London. It was there that John first demonstrated his considerable abilities as an archaeologist. His work reveals significant new knowledge about the late Upper Paleolithic and early Mesolithic, and the innovative methods he used and the quality of the subsequent publication was hailed by reviewers as setting a model for the future. I first began working more closely with John from the late 90s, when we began work in advance of what Maurice has already referred to, Terminal 5 at Heathrow, which ultimately turned out to be the largest single archaeological site ever to be excavated in the UK. Working with John Barrett and encouraged by our client BAA, the three of us developed a new approach to archaeological inquiry, subsequently carried out by a joint venture led by John called Framework Archaeology. The innovative excavation and publication engendered, and I think continues to excite, considerable interest and recognition, and revolutionised understanding of the prehistory of the Middle Thames. But it was John who turned our bright ideas into reality, training and empowering an 80-strong team in the field, and leading on a publication which made results accessible, expressly aimed not only at an academic audience, which was pretty unusual. Subsequent work at Stansted for BAA broadened John's heritage experience further when, as leader on environmental impact assessment, he was responsible for integration of archaeological evidence with historic buildings, documentary, cartographic and landscape studies, covering an area of over 7 square kilometres of countryside. But despite John's involvement in a series of very significant heritage projects, I know that in many ways the thing that John found most beneficial about working with BAA is that it trained him in management procedures and techniques that he would never otherwise have had access to. He rapidly had to learn how to assess and manage risks to budget and programs, implement and manage change in working practices, and crucially to challenge assumptions, so as to achieve that holy grail for the BAA, not business as usual, but world-class performance. So all this experience is what John has brought to the Society, and is why I think he's been so effective in the role. He understands about research and the need to facilitate excellence in research, And he's also done a great job at promoting this to a wider audience through initiatives such as Magna Carta exhibition, Courtyard Lates, and of course the Kelmscott project, making our work accessible and relevant. But alongside this, he's been equally mindful of the need to work within financial constraints and made it his business to ensure that our financial affairs are on a sound footing. Early on, for example, he drew a much-needed distinction between core and project costs, which may sound dull, but fundamental to ensuring that new initiatives could be afforded and would deliver value. And he's had no problem with challenging assumptions, often a tricky area for an organisation with a history like ours, but as you've already heard, initiating the rewriting of the statutes, for example, which were modernised without losing our links to the past. And I think it's this ability so successfully to balance research and a love of the study of the past with business acumen which really marks John out. In my experience, it's an unusual combination within the heritage sector, but one which has worked very much to the society's benefit. Now, I've heard it said on occasion that John can be somewhat curmudgeonly. And, sometimes he is. But very often it's due to a sense of frustration and the need to get things right. Because working with him for as long as I have, I know that John really does care about delivering to the best of his ability. And despite this tendency, he does nonetheless inspire great loyalty and affection. Behind the scenes, he's led a team with a real sense of family. For me, it was one of the privileges of being president to be some part of that, and I really valued it. During my years as president, John was both a great support and has become a great friend. I'm now even almost fully acclimatised to his sense of humour. That time has allowed me to see just how hard all the staff here work on our behalf, and I know how hard John has worked too, as has already been said, doggedly, most of all on the lease. And should we ultimately be successful in staying at Burlington House, it will be very much down to John's determination and very much his legacy. So, happy retirement, John. Very well deserved.
Thank you very much, Jill. That's very good of you. Thank you very much.
I can now call upon Paul Drury.
Well, my time as president alongside John was eventful, to say the least. During COVID shutdowns, he and I, my fellow officers, worked much more closely together than the president in his statutory role, his or her statutory role of general direction of the Society's affairs. In normal times might, albeit mostly, unfortunately, by Zoom. John's contribution during this difficult time was definitely above and beyond. In particular, and this seems to be an emerging theme in what we've heard, he worked very hard to keep up morale among our scattered staff during the long periods of shutdown. He also sought out opportunities to turn short-term adversity into long-term benefits. I'm thinking of, for example, the library enhancements, the grants that he managed to extract from the various schemes, and indeed the AV system in this room, all of which were the result of knowing which button to press in the applications at the right moment. But before COVID, we'd already faced trying times, particularly during the events that finally established our ethical conduct body, at arm's length from officers and council. Particularly after the most unpleasant meeting I have ever had to chair or even attend, John's support, born of his strong moral compass, was crucial in stiffening my sometimes wavering resolve to see the matter through, as we eventually did, with the support of an overwhelming vote of the fellowship. That matter at least had a successful conclusion. Unlike our tenure at Burlington House and the lease, which will grind on after now both of us have left our respective offices. John's dogged persistence and patience in leading the courtyard societies, which someone at the time likened to herding cats, has maintained continuous pressure on government. Less stalwart souls would have given up long ago. Like others before me, in my naive enthusiasm, I thought that a settlement could be reached in my term. John was much more circumspect. We can now only watch and wait as others toil. Whatever the formal position under the statutes, the General Secretary can, and in my view should, influence the long-term direction of a society like ours, simply because of continuity and the opportunity that presents. I think we owe a great deal to John on this, particularly his underlying objective of demystifying the society, extending our outreach and influence wherever he could and did. This has been a consistent strand running through most areas of our current activity, from Kelmscott, our meetings, the library and collections, and particularly our implementation today, I sincerely hope, of the affiliate scheme. That's a very strong legacy on which we can build, which I'm sure the society will continue to build. And I greatly look forward to keeping in touch with John, and John with us, in the future. Best wishes, John, for your retirement. And thank you very much for all you've done for us.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
We will propose a toast to John in the library at drinks after the meeting. Moving on with the agenda, following the ballot earlier today, I declare the following are duly elected Fellows of the Society of Antiquaries of London: Amy Jeffs, Michelle Langley, Ivan Luskov, Daryl Ogier, Daniel Poor, Adrian Randolph, Victoria Ridgway, Barbara Shaler, Ben Shaw, Tanya Schreiber, Peter van Alphen, Alan Williams, and Richard Ragg. Admissions.
The following, being in attendance and having signed the obligation required by the statutes, desire to be admitted Fellows: Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence, the Right Honourable Sir Rupert Jackson, and Dr. Elizabeth Key Foden. Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence.
Sir Timothy, by the authority and in the name of the Society of Antiquaries of London, I admit you a Fellow thereof. Congratulations and welcome.
The Right Honourable Sir Rupert Jackson.
Sir Rupert, by the authority and in the name of the Society of Antiquaries of London, I admit you a Fellow thereof. Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. And Dr. Elizabeth Key Foden.
By the authority and in the name of the Society of Antiquaries of London, I admit you a Fellow thereof. Welcome. Thank you. We now come to the complicated bit of the meeting. We have two motions to vote on. The first is the appointment of Moore, Kingston, Smith as our auditors. We have a system of voting both online and in the room. If I could ask the General Secretary to explain the process, which, bear with us, is a little bit more complex than it might otherwise be.
Okay, so we have two motions. First of all, I will introduce Dominic Wallace, our Head of Development, who will do a demonstration of how to vote online for the people who are watching this on Zoom. So Dominic, are you able to come in? Yes.
Yes. So from the Zoom screen, if you move your cursor to pull up the menu at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a button called Reactions. Click on that and select Raise Hand. Please leave your hand raised while we count votes. The General Secretary will tell you when to lower your hand, which you do by clicking Reactions again and selecting Lower Hand. Thank you.
Okay. So I must stress that only fellows can vote. Please do not vote again online if you have voted by post. And if you're here in the room, please don't vote in the room if you've already voted by post. That's naughty. And because of a technical arrangement, we will do the no votes first. And the way we will do it is we'll do the no votes in the room, which we'll count. And then I will ask people online to raise their virtual hands for no, and we'll count those. And then I'll tell them to put their hands down. Then we'll do the yeses in the room. Then we'll do the online, okay? So we'll go through and we'll do the motion is to approve the appointment of Moore, Kingston, Smith as the Society's auditors for 2022 to 23. So this will be almost a bit like a trial run. So, okay, so those of you in the room who oppose the motion to appoint them as our auditors, please raise your hand now. Good. Those of you online, could you please raise your virtual hand now if you oppose the appointment of Moore, Kingston, Smith as our auditors? And please keep that virtual hand up while we do the count. Okay, nobody online. So that's fine. So nobody voted no. So please lower your hands. So if there are no votes, I'll now move to the room. Those of you who approve the appointment of the auditors, raise your hand. Yeah. I think that's pretty unanimous. And those of you who are online, please raise your virtual hand to approve the appointment of the auditors. Linda, it's okay. It's carried.
We've approved the appointment of Moore, Kingston, Smith as the Society's auditors for 2022-2023. We now have the motion to adopt Order 6, the affiliate membership scheme. Can I just say before we move to a vote on this that as one of our past presidents has already indicated, there's been long discussion about this. I believe the idea was first mooted by Stuart Piggott in the 1950s. We've given it some consideration. The objective is, of course, to continue to open up the Society's interest and public awareness, therefore fulfilling our charitable duties. And the indications are that there is great public interest in our work out there, as shown, for instance, by the very healthy attendances at the public lecture series that John introduced in his period as General Secretary. Can I remind you that there's been considerable discussion about this recently at Council? It was put forward as a proposal under Paul Drury's presidency. It was approved initially by Council last July, and there was then a consultation with the Fellowship in the autumn, with Council returning to consider the representations that were made by fellows in that consultation in December this year. There are some upfront costs in launching this scheme, but we did commission an externally professional business planner to look at the case, and Council believes that the scheme will, in the medium term, generate a surplus as well as fulfilling our charitable objectives. So the Council is very strongly supportive of this. John, over to you to manage the voting.
Okay. I'm not going to have anybody say anything. You can ask him.
Yes, that's true. We were going to invite anyone in the room, if I can see them, who wishes to make comment, or anyone online who wishes to make comment to say so now. Do bear in mind, if you want to say something, please raise your hand, and can you also identify yourself, because the people online will not know who you are by looking at you in the room. Are there any questions or comments on the motion to adopt the affiliate scheme? I can see no one in the room. Is there anyone online? One. Don't, please.
Jane Horrick, Fellow. May I ask what level of subscription you're thinking of?
The level of subscription from memory is
60.
£60 for ordinary members and a discounted rate for students. Are there any other questions? Perhaps pass over to you, John, then to deal with the...
Okay, so the same form as before. Please don't vote if you've already voted. And we will do in the room all those who are voting against the adoption of Order 6, affiliate membership scheme, please raise your hands now so we can do the count. And all those online who are voting against the adoption of the affiliate membership scheme, raise your virtual hand now, and please keep it up until I tell you to remove it.
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so in the room, those voting to support the motion to adopt the affiliate membership scheme, please raise your hand. Okay. And those of you online to support the motion, please raise your virtual hand. Thank you very much. You may remove your virtual hand from the screen.
I'm going to continue with the agenda while our office staff count the votes, and we'll report that a little later in the agenda when Linda gives me a wave to show that she has the count ready. The next item on the agenda is for me to report to you the list of fellows moved since the anniversary meeting in June last year. Thomas Adaman, Marcus Bull, Annie Cobert, Christopher Chippendale, Geoffrey Clark, Timothy Denham, Sheila Elsden, Robert Erskine, Pierre Garrigou-Grandchamp, Raina Grun, Ruth Gilding, Barbara Hanwalt, John Hurd, Andrew Jackson, Sonia Jelic, Martha Jarkowski, Grace McCombie, Dugald O'Reilly, Anastasios Papageorgiou, Rupert Reedsdale, Christopher Roosevelt, William Saturno, Helga Sveden, Krish Sitar, Claire Smith, Toshiku Takima, Karen Watts, Jennifer Webb, Victoria Whitworth, and Christopher Wilson. I now wish to read the list of those who have sadly died since the last anniversary meeting in June 2021. Otto Bratch, John Burbridge, Christopher Challis, Martin Crossley Evans, Ian Curtis, David Davis, Christopher Day, Anthony Duboulet, David Diamond, Bruce Eagles, George Egan, Noel Fallows, John Farrant, Neil Faulkner, Ian Fisher, Victor Gray, Donald Henson, James Hodgson, Vassas Karageorgios, Ronald Lightbrown, Michael Liversidge, David Luscombe, Jean MacDonald, Geoffrey Martin, Sean McGrail, George McHardy, Graham Morgan, Thomas Pritchard, Priscilla Roberts, Sebastian Sommer, Johannes Thierkauf, James Thomas, Roger Thorne, Richard West, Ben Whitwell, Caroline Wickham-Jones. Thank you. We now have the result of the voting for the affiliate membership scheme. The voting in favour of the affiliate membership scheme, 73 postal ballots saying yes, 62 online yes, 24 in the room plus on Zoom, giving 159 votes in favour. Against, 10 postal, 11 online, none in Zoom or in the room, 21 against. So the adoption of Order 6 on the affiliate membership scheme is carried, and the appointment of the auditors, as previously reported, is also carried. So I'll sign those ballot results. Just pause to say, I think that is a great moment for the Society. It's something that we have long worked on, and I think will make an enormous difference to us for the future. Thank you for your support for that. The last list I have to read for you, coming to item 11, is the list of benefactors for the Society for 2021-22. The COVID Cultural Recovery Fund, Arts Council England, support for our library collections in the Prattainton collection, Bruce Watson FSA. We also thank in library area our gratitude to the following who have adopted a manuscript under that scheme: Anne Crawford, Claire Gapper, Philip Holdsworth, N.R. Jensen-Jones, Edmund King, Pamela Lotterley, Tim Madge, Jonathan Parkhouse, Tim Powis-Leib, Richard Rastall, Judith Riley, Freya Rojo, Curtis Runnels, Dominic Selwood, Bill Shannon, Peter Varlow and David Wickham. We're also grateful to fellows who've contributed to the digitisation of the Roll Chronicle to make it available and accessible to the public: Richard Andrews, Martin Biddle, Mavis Bimpson, John Bowman, Mark Brisbane, Reverend Roger Brown, Helen Carron, John Considine, Anne Crawford, Andrea Tanner Duncan, Margaret Ford, Jill Franklin, Edward Harris, Sarah Heal, Robin Harcourt William, Maurice Howard, Janet Huskinson, John Kenyon, Vanessa King, Maria Medlicott, Vincent McGaw, Lane Morris, Susan Lanice, Ashley Null, Peter Purton, Sir Paul Ruddock, Nicholas Sandon, Pamela Jane Shaw, David Sherlock, John Titterton, Charles Trollope, Alison Walker, David Wickham, Rowan Wimpster, Philip Whitbourne, and William Zajac. We also acknowledge the contribution to the Save Burlington House campaign from Lynn Blackmore, FSA, and for the Kelmscott and Morris Past, Present and Future project, generous donations from Claire Caldwell, Arts and Craft Tours, Brian Ayres, Douglas Bronston, Richard Blurton, John Booth II, Bruce Butcher and Diane Butcher, Peter Bowden, Hugo Burge, Richard Camber, Eden Collinsworth, Alan Cowie, John Cruz, Mila de Botton, Heidi Degan, Patrick Donnelly, Anthony Emery, Catherine Footer, Giles Gelwood, Caroline Godwin, Marguerite Dean, Jolyn Hall, Richard Halsey, Anthony Harding, Jonathan Harris, Vanessa Hart, Mark Hassel, Tom Hassel, Brian Horton, Simon Host, SEIB Insurance Brokers, Simon Jervis, Caroline Knight, Martin Levy, Patricia Levy, Lowell Libson, Ferdinand and Johanna Lamarick Byboom, Jim Miles, Lennox and Janie Money, Helen Morton, Don Mullins, Andrew Murrison, Dame Ginty Nelson, Sarah Nichols, Eric Nye, Cherry Perifour, Sir Roy Strong, Reverend Roger Scoons, Susan Webster, David Taylor, Colin Riddler, Jane Wainwright, Simon Wedgwood. And we also note with gratefulness a legacy from Joan Nelson Tarn. Apologies if I mess up reading these names. Little problem with dyslexia still hangs in my background. Having noted our thanks to those benefactors of the Society, I now turn to the Treasurer to make his annual statement. Stephen.
Thank you. Are we staying here? Are we clearing off? Stay here. So this is the report of Council and financial statements for the year ended 31st of March 2021, so a year ago. And first of all, apologies for the delay in presenting this report. It would normally be presented in the autumn following the end of that particular financial year. There was a delay this year, partly because of COVID, but more importantly because we were without a head of finance between July and October last summer. And fortunately, we've been rejoined by a previous head of finance who came back to us in October, Katie Drake, who's done an excellent job in pulling all of this together. A copy of the report and accounts has already been published and is available on the Society's website as well as the Charity Commission's website. Finance Committee has, of course, as always, reviewed the report in detail, and Council has approved the financial statements. But before I kick off, I'd like to make one initial point. Annual report and accounts is important for a number of reasons. It's a key part of our financial management. It's a requirement of regulators. It's a matter of transparency and very desirable because of that. And it also signs us off, the auditors sign us off in approving the the annual accounts as a going concern. And indeed, they've signed the Society off as a going concern this time round. But I should stress, it's only a snapshot in time. It tells us about income and expenditure and various other issues in that particular year, but it doesn't tell us very much, or not very much clearly, about longer-term sustainability. And that is the issue that faces the Society now. And I'll come back to that at the end of the presentation. And I will try and be as quick as possible. Find the appropriate button. As always, this is the format on the screen of the annual report and accounts, if you get the opportunity to look at it. The narrative, the information on legal structure, governance, etc., the auditor's report, and the detailed financial information at the end on pages 40 to 60. And a few headlines from the annual report and accounts. First of all, the fellowship. The graph at the bottom half of the page shows the trend of the numbers of fellows since 2013 and up to March 2021. And over this period, the number of fellows has stayed fairly static, with approximately 100 increase or so over a 7-year period. And this is at a time when, and I think I said this last year, despite the economic situation, the heritage sector and interest in the past continues to grow. So the fellowship is a key source of income for the Society, and put simply, if we're to stabilise our financial situation in the medium to long term, we need to grow the fellowship. And that is not all we need to do, but it's certainly an essential component, and it's a point that John has made several times over. Income for the year ended 31st of March 2020. The total income of the Society and Lucerna Limited, which is the company responsible for Kelmscott, was 3.4 million, as you can see on the slide, up 31% from last year. And the major variances to the previous year, 2019-20, were restrictions on donations and grants, restricted donations and grants for Kelmscott Past, Present and Future project, and they were just over 2 million in 2021, an increase of almost 1.2 million on the previous year. As Kelmscott Manor was closed last year due to the redevelopment under the Past, Present and Future project, our trading income from the manor decreased by 290,000 to 134,000. And our room hire income at Burlington House decreased by 88,000 due to the effects of COVID-19. So those were the main variations from the previous year. Now look at expenditure for the year ended 2021. Expenditure before unrealised and realised gains on investments and movement in pension scheme provision increased by 3%, or £62,000 on the previous year. The overall increase relates to several elements, increases and decreases, across all expenditure categories. But the ones to note in particular, which were different from the previous year, we spent 110,000 on the library strategic plan, having not spent anything on that in the previous year. Kelmscott Past, Present and Future uncapitalised project costs increased by 120,000 as the project entered a major construction phase, now completed. And support costs, that is finance, admin, human resources, health and safety, and the costs associated with including rent and associated costs, including rent and maintenance, increased by 116,000. Rent, in particular, was a major increase, as I think you already know. And finally, costs such as maintaining the museum collections, raising the profile of the Society, and our seminar and lecture programme decreased as COVID continued to impact on the operations of the Society. a total of 120,000 difference across these categories. Moving on, the net position then, comparing the income and expenditure. Net income before gains on investments was just over £1 million, whereas last year, the previous year, it was 312,000. Investments. The portfolio increased by 10%, or 1.6 million, from 15,600,000 at March 2020 to 17 million, nearly 300,000 at March 2021, as you can see. And markets recovered after decreases related to COVID, resulting in unrealised gains of about 2.5 million. We sold 405,000 worth of investments from the Kelmscott Investment Fund to provide the Society's match funding for the Kelmscott Past, Present and Future project, and 505,000 from the General Fund to pay Burlington House rent, the increasing rent levels which I've referred to, and to alleviate our cash flow. And we utilised the liquidity fund that we'd set up for that purpose to pay the rent. Income streams, a little bit more detail. 8% of our income came from the, 60.8% of our income came from the Kelmscott Past, Present and Future project funding. That's the dark blue. The Society's major income streams after this comprise subscriptions, 17.2%, investment income, 15.7%, and other major income stream. Our other major income stream was trading income from room hire and Kelmscott Manor, and they were significantly reduced in 2021 due to COVID and because the manor was closed to complete the construction work. So that was only 0.2%, the very small sliver at the top of the pie chart. Expenditure analysis. Expenditure is shown on pages 47 to 48 of the accounts, and it's split between restricted and unrestricted funds. But on the pie chart, you can see the cost of raising funds, which was 11.5%, and that is the costs incurred in trading income, generating trading income and grants and donations, and it comprises the development office, 107,000, cost of sales for our room hire, of 3,000, and cost of sales for the Kelmscott Manor operations of 42,000, which was much reduced again in 2021 for reasons I've already mentioned. And then the other three parts of the pie chart are our charitable activities, conservation, research and dissemination. And conservation accounts for 31.1% of our total expenditure, comprising Morris grants, non-trading costs at Kelmscott, uncapitalised Kelmscott Past, Present and Future costs, and the care of our own collections. Research activities are 29.2% of total expenditure, including the running of the library at Burlington House, 130,000, and research grants of 229,000. And dissemination accounts for 28.2%, including our publication programme, the costs of communicating with fellows, and the running of the lecture programmes. Allocated across all of these, and this is important, are the support costs of 969,000, which include finance and admin, human resources, health and safety, and as I said before, the costs associated with Burlington House, including rent and maintenance. And that brings me finally to future financial considerations, which is where the sustainability I mentioned at the beginning comes in. The challenges that we face are in the following areas. Room hire. Our room hire has recovered now in 21-22, but it's still impacted by COVID, and it will take a while to recover fully to its previous levels. The Burlington House lease As you know, our rents continue to rise for Burlington House. In 22-23, this is projected to be 222,000. It is starting to become more noticeable by the month that we are spending the bare minimum that we have to on maintenance at Burlington House, while the lease situation remains unresolved. And I'm sure Martin will say a little bit more about this in his presidential address. Fellowship, we've already talked about. Our numbers are fairly static. Increasing them is a significant way to increase our income. And we've set up a fellowship committee to explore innovative and different ways of attracting fellows and diversifying our fellowship. And there's also, of course, the affiliate scheme, which will eventually generate additional income. The university's superannuation scheme pension contributions continue to escalate. In October 2021, they were raised to 21.4%, with further increases very likely. And to limit further liability, which we can only do up to a point, new staff are now enrolled in a different pension scheme. Investments, we are continuing to draw down on our investments to meet the escalating rent demands at Burlington House. And this is not only the annual drawdown which we do permit ourselves, but it is also the liquidity fund from our investments. And of course, reducing our capital over time reduces our investment income. And finally, Kelmscott Manor, which reopened on the 1st of April, which was excellent news. And initial indications are of usage and income are very positive. But COVID impacts are still being felt, and the manor has a lot to achieve to deliver over time the agreed business plan, which I'm confident that it will do. So, there continue, year on year, to be severe pressures on our bottom line. A continuing annual deficit on our running costs, and indications are that this will not be alleviated in the short term. It's critical that a resolution of the long-running lease saga is resolved at Burlington House in the near future. The President will no doubt say something more about this, as I've already indicated, not least on where we've got to with the lease negotiations and on a strategic approach to moving the society towards greater sustainability. Thank you very much. I should just say that if people have got burning questions, we could perhaps take a couple, but only, I think, if they're high-level questions. Questions of detail, as it says on this slide, to do with the accounts are better addressed, I think, by email to either myself or to Katie Drake, and our email addresses are up on the screen.
Are there any raised hands? You've got one online, I think. Is that?
And it's just asking if you press the PowerPoint presentation.
Right. Okay. That's fine. Can you just click the PowerPoint forward?
Yep.
That's it. Thank you very much, Treasurer. I think that gives a very clear overview of where the accounts stood. Thank you. We now turn to my first presidential address to you. I don't want to detain you for too long, and I don't want to rehearse the information that's already been circulated to you in the annual report. But I'm going to just pull out a few things of the highlights of this year, then look at some contemporary issues, and then look forward. So a sort of three-age system that is appropriate for an antiquarian audience. The Society, as you've seen, has weathered the pandemic. It's survived. It has continued to operate as best it can. And I think the staff and fellows should be congratulated for that. Other organisations have not fared so well. And we've continued to make a healthy level of grants for research and conservation, as Stephen has just shown in his figures. We've also taken advantage of the changes that have taken place as a result of the pandemic, particularly with work by our library and collections team, who've made some fundamental progress on developing the Society's facilities, including work on digitising our archives, including the early minute books, some very significant progress on the barcoding of books in the library and the introduction of library cards. I must say I was delighted today to go into the library to take a book off the shelf, go to the desk, show my card, click, click, and it's all issued. It was a magic moment, both for me and the person on the desk. These small things demonstrate the progress that's been made, and significantly, very significantly, the collections online catalogue has been built and is populated and operating, giving integrated access to our library, archives and collections in a way that is fit for the 21st century, representing an enormous amount of work from our team and showing the way that our collections and resources can be used better in the future. That's fantastic testament to our team's work. We've also had the launch of our first digital exhibition, Henry VIII, Defender of the Faith, as an online exhibition curated by Maurice Howard, John Cooper, which has attracted a large audience. And importantly, it's also pioneered the development of a structure that can be used for future digital exhibition projects. It would also be appropriate, not to repeat what we've already said, but to celebrate the reopening of Kelmscott Manor. As we've noted earlier, there was a wonderful event on the 24th of March. This success builds on the great efforts of the Kelmscott Manor staff, especially Gavin Williams and Cathy Haslam, that has really transformed the manor and the work that we've already noted that John has put in. And alongside the National Lottery Heritage funding the Society received for that, 4.3 million, we've raised 1.3 million in match funding with the great help of the Kelmscott Manor campaign group under the chairmanship of Martin Levy, with donors which I have already listed. That achievement is the tribute to the hard work and foresight of our staff, and I'd particularly like to thank Dominic Wallace, our head of development, whose real efforts lie behind the success in raising that £1.3 million funding. May we have many more successes like that in the future. Looking back over the year, I would also note that last July, Council received and adopted the recommendations of an important working party on equality and diversity that had been established by my predecessor. The Council accepted its recommendations, and as part of the process of implementing those, established a new fellowship committee that met for the first time in January this year and is carrying forward the work on equality and diversity alongside a broader agenda of developing support for the fellowship and developing the infrastructure of the Society around fellowship and the newly adopted affiliate scheme. Turning now to current issues and challenges, we cannot but start by considering where we are over the lease Burlington House that the Treasurer has already mentioned. This has been discussed in a number of previous anniversary addresses, and the dispute with government has deep roots, and resolving it, as Paul has already said, is a very long, drawn-out process, and one on which it is difficult to brief fellows fully, as the negotiation remains confidential. Suffice it to say that I think it has been frustratingly slow to get responses from government, and it's been equally complex and slow process of agreeing common positions with our colleagues in the learned societies around the courtyard. But progress has been made, and as you will be aware, since November 2020, we've engaged a highly successful political campaign to garner support for our case and the case of the other learned societies for a reasonable solution to continuing our tenure here. The work at Westminster has been coordinated with great skill and humour by our fellow Tim Lawton, who I'm glad to see is here today, aided by our advisors, April 6th, particularly Vernon Hunt, who has made a very strong contribution to this very successful campaign. We're extremely grateful to Tim and other members of both houses, including Lord Cormac, who's also with us here today, who have championed our cause and garnered enormous cross-party support. That in many ways culminated with the Westminster Hall debate last June, when our case was put, and in responding to the debate, the Minister, Eddie Hughes MP, went on record as saying, "We have heard the real financial concerns of the 5 learned societies, and the issue has received significant media coverage. We, as then MHCLG, are determined to try and keep the learned societies at Burlington House." Fine words. We hope we see them implemented. The depth of parliamentary support and political effectiveness of the campaign are remarkable. After a series of long drawn-out exchanges and meetings with civil servants, learned societies have now responded in detail to our landlords, now the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, presenting our detailed proposals for an affordable and sustainable lease, and including outline plans for further opening up of our collections to a wider public, therefore contributing to the levelling up agenda of this government. We had requested a meeting between MPs, society representatives on one side, civil servants and the Secretary of State, Michael Gove, on the other, in order to discuss these proposals face to face. I'm pleased to say that we heard last week that this request has been agreed. We now await a date in Mr. Gove's diary, always assuming that political circumstances don't suddenly change in the next few weeks. I will not add any sotto voce comments around that. It would be entirely inappropriate at this moment to hope for the continuation or otherwise of government and ministers in office. I hope we may be reaching an end game. We need to continue the pressure and work hard on this. We've been through cycles of optimism and dejection before. We hope this is the last, and I hope I will have better news for fellows in the future. Don't hold your breath. Second, I just want to underline a point that our Treasurer has made about our financial position. We are running a deficit. The Treasurer's report has shown our current financial position, but in the nature of statutory accounts, it's not always easy to distinguish between short-term factors like the COVID pandemic and the Kelmscott project, distinguish what the underlying pattern is. Katie Drake, our Head of Finance and Resources, has worked in detail through the figures, and at the February meeting of the Finance Committee gave us a detailed analysis which led to some sobering reading, indicating an underlying problem of deficit. Given the current economic climate and steeply rising inflation, the society is going to have to take action to address this. There are a number of uncertainties, not least the issue of our lease, and we will need to explore different avenues for both raising income and cutting costs. But it's my view, officers, this should be tackled in terms of a medium-term strategic plan, which I will return to in a moment. Third, in the contemporary review, I wish to mention the war in Ukraine. Aside from the impact of that on us and our society, the chilling effects that those events are having on the people in Ukraine is something that concerns us all. Just after Russia invaded Ukraine, the Society issued a statement condemning the action and calling in particular for the protection of civilians and the protection of cultural property. We are all, I think, frustrated by an inability to do very much in this terrible situation. In this context, I've been in discussion with our fellow Ian Ridler, who has close personal links with Ukraine, and we're actively exploring how we can support Ukrainian archaeologists and their families. As a symbol of support, the Society has ordered a Ukrainian flag. It's been rather a run on orders on Ukrainian flags. I hoped it would be flying above us today. It will be flying above this building to indicate our support in the near future. And I'm delighted to say, with the approval of the affiliate membership scheme, Ian has nominated Alexandra Michlukhina, a student at Kiev, to be the first member of our affiliate scheme, as symbolic of our support for our friends and colleagues in Ukraine. To make a more substantial contribution, we are also actively exploring a scheme that has been developed by the Royal Historical Society, designed to provide financial support to allow Ukrainian academics to spend short periods in the UK or EU countries. We are actively pursuing that, and I will be putting a notice in Salon in a few weeks' time, showing how fellows can make donations to help support that. I hope that small contribution will help people in the Ukraine and mark our revulsion at what the Russians have done there and our support for civilized values. I now turn to planning for the future. And it's very easy for us to become focused and deeply embedded in discussion of short-term issues, deferring discussion of the long-term future of the society until people have time, which they never do. That's not sustainable. Whatever happens over our lease, where we are headquartered, we're going to need to raise significant funds to invest in the society and to pursue our charitable aims. The only way that a learned society can do that is by thinking carefully about its future. I'm of the view that the COVID-19 pandemic and a whole series of other world events have had long-term structural impacts on society in general, not dissimilar to the effects brought about by the world wars in the 20th century, if not on the same scale. We have ourselves become used to the use of digital technology we're using today, and that's had positive benefits in broadening participation as well as negative impacts in reducing the number of people who attend meetings in person. So forth. With the long-term change in society in mind and bearing in mind the financial challenges that society faces, we're therefore embarking on a large-scale strategic review of the society which will help us consider the shape it should take for the middle of the 21st century. We intend to work on this in the second half of 2022, producing what I hope will be a 5 to 10 year plan which sets high-level objectives which will guide action and policy in the short term. In preparation for this, we need to have a wide and fundamental discussion about the society's roles and its activities, as well as its relationships with other organisations in the sector. In particular, I think we need to think about the nature of the society as something much broader than a narrowly archaeological organisation, and understand that the landscape within which the society operates has changed remarkably, certainly in the period since I've been a fellow, with the growth and flourishing of the Chartered Institute of Archaeologists, the rejuvenation that we're seeing at the Council for British Archaeology, and the development of organisations like the Heritage Alliance. No longer are we one organisation campaigning on our own. There is a landscape of people campaigning in the same area. Alongside such developments, we also, I think many of us are aware, of the gradual decline in scale and influence of other organisations, including many of the county societies and some of the national societies, whose membership have declined very radically at a period when our fellowship has stayed more or less stable. It's key then that we think not only about ourselves but about the whole sector and working collaboratively together and creating joint initiatives with these societies. Duplication of effort, competition for influence, audiences and resources is not only pointless, it's self-destructive. And that should underpin our strategic review. In preparation for the review, I would like the Society to consider the following 4 issues. Firstly, and we raised these at the Fellowship Committee and discussed them in January, raised them at Council. Can we better articulate what fellowship means so that we can continue to attract people to join us, not least in the context of our affiliate membership scheme? And in doing this, I think it's important to start by saying, with apologies to John F. Kennedy, ask not what your society can do for you, ask what you can do for your society. Fellowship is not simply membership, and it should not be seen as transactional in the sense of what do I get for my subscription. Fellowship implies a joint commitment to shared interests and promotion and support of charitable objectives. In this context, we've got to think hard about the long-term value of the Society's assets, its library collection and its fellowship to our disciplines and society at large. This is going to involve some rethinking of how we engage and involve the fellowship in our charitable objectives. While doing this, we do also need to consider what we offer to the fellowship for their subscriptions. and take a hard look at whether this meets current needs. In order to do this, we need an up-to-date understanding of the views of the Fellowship, hence a proper survey that collects views from the full range of the Society's activities to form a sound basis for future planning. There are issues like the future of the ordinary meetings, which have had very few attendances in person at 5 p.m. on Thursdays, but fulfill an important role in our governance process. We need to think how best to develop those meetings and our rest of our lecture programme. The second question I think we need to contemplate is what people think about the society, what their perceptions are and how we can improve them. If we're going to thrive in the future, we need to be more diverse and better reflect the broad composition of our discipline and societies at large. We've gained some quite useful insights into perceptions, both from fellows who've resigned, from the headhunters who talk to candidates, potential candidates for the job of General Secretary. But we also need to think more broadly about how we present ourselves, what we appear like, and that will take time. Not only doing that will we better understand ourselves, but we will, I think, be better at delivering our charitable objectives and strengthen ourselves through that process. I've been through this process in my university where we managed to get very useful insights into what the downside of views at the university was, and that's helped us very greatly in our communication strategy. Doing that here, looking not only at our fellowship, but the people who say, I don't want to be a fellow, is going to be important. Third, as the Treasurer has already indicated, we do need to consider the size of the fellowship. That's not just a matter of long-term financial sustainability, although we do need to be sustainable if we're going to do what we want to do, and I believe that indicates that we need to grow the size of the fellowship. But we, as Stephen has already said, the need to involve a broader range of disciplines and reflect the growth in our sector over the past few years. When I was elected a fellow 30-something years ago, there were 2,000 fellows, but there were very many fewer people employed in our sector than there are today. And my suspicion is that the proportion of our sector that's represented by the fellowship is much smaller than it could and should be. So I'm personally in favour of increasing the size of the fellowship, but I am also sure that this shouldn't dilute the quality of fellowship. Qualification for election under our statutes requires that candidates be distinguished in the fields of archaeology, architectural or art history and other antiquarian subject matters across the academic, heritage, charitable and private sectors. We need to attract people from across that broad range, and we need to be attracting them from an earlier age. Our age profile, as our past president showed in his presentation last year, is too high. Speaking personally, I was elected to Fellowship of the Society at the age of 29, and I wasn't in a minority at that stage. There were a large number of people in the late 20s and 30s who were elected. We need to understand that being distinguished doesn't equate with being old, and I would urge that all fellows look around them and seek candidates for fellowship amongst promising early career people, nominate them so that we can continue to be an effective, dynamic and relevant organisation. As I said, other organisations' membership's gone down, ours has stayed steady. It needs to increase. Fourthly, I think we need to review and reform how our fellowship is elected. The present system of nomination by existing fellows, completion of a blue paper, it's being read at an ordinary meeting and then suspended so that fellows can look at it prior to ballot is cumbersome. And its shortcomings are illustrated by the very low number of fellows making nominations, the limited number of fellows who vote the ballot, and the slow process this takes. I'm sure that we could think of ways of modernising our system, making it more effective and quicker without doing anything to dilute the quality of the fellowship. The quality is there, we simply need to have the mechanisms for bringing the people in. Current system has evolved over a long time based on a paper-based system with a very small organisation. Our objective must be to maintain quality people for election, but develop a new way of doing things that is suitable for the 21st century. I hope and believe that as fellows in an active and thoughtful learned society, you will all engage in the debate of these important issues over the next 12 months and help us move forward in our 316th year as a stronger and more relevant organisation. As I draw to a close, I would like now to formally introduce our new General Secretary, Andrew MacDonald. Andrew joined us this week, having held a series of strategic and managerial roles in the heritage sector, most recently at the Museum of the Home. He previously worked in the media, holding senior roles, Channel 4 News, other organisations. He brings a different portfolio to the society. We welcome you and we look forward to working with you. And finally, I'd like to pay tribute and thank the staff of the Society at all levels for their continued excellent work, and my fellow officers, Stephen Dunmore, Heather Sabir, John Cooper, who've been great support in my first year as President. Thank you for your attention.
Fellows and guests, I have pleasure in proposing that the thanks of the meeting be returned to the President for his address and that he be requested to allow it to be published. Do I have your agreement? Thank you very much. I hope you will now join us for drinks in the library, where we will toast the health of our outgoing General Secretary. The meeting stands adjourned.